going on, people? Laid out on the table here, I have a tidy tail lighting bundle kit from Taco Moto. Let's see what comes in this particular kit. On the left here, we've got our handlebar control switch. These components in the middle are for the LED turn signal conversion up front, and this is the rear signal for the back for the tidy tail. I also decided that it'd be best to include the Enduro plate for your license plate holder in the back. That way this kit is rounded out front to back. So let's go ahead and see what it takes to get all this stuff on the bike. Let's run through the tools that I ended up using on this install real quick. Starting up at the top left there, got a pair of diagonal cutters. I got a 13mm and 14mm box end wrench, an adjustable wrench, a 1/4 inch drive ratchet with a 6-inch extension, an 8mm socket and a 6mm socket. Got a few zip ties here to represent some that I used. I also used a 3mm Allen key. I've got a variety of screwdrivers down here. These were mostly Phillips, and just kind of to touch on that real quick, the reason I ended up using like this 90-degree setup with this tip is just for some of the handlebar controls. Sometimes you just can't get a full-length screwdriver into certain spots, so you'll need either like a stubby or something like a 90-degree setup, so that's why that's there. And then we got the cordless power drill with the 2 drill bits, a 5/32 drill bit that I use as a pilot bit and to mark some holes, and the 7/32 inch bit that was the correct size bit for the hardware that would go there. Also got some electrical tape that was used to cover some connections. The front headlight mask and turn signal assembly needs to be removed. These 2 bolts up by the display need to be removed. Pull the headlight mask forward off those retainers. It also has 2 posts that go down to the front fender. We need to pop these 2 cables out of this retainer behind the mask. Start disconnecting some of our electrical connections. This is for the ignition switch here in the middle. Got one of our turn signals over here. Sometimes when these turn signal connectors fight you, what I like to do is I'll actually spread this latch open and then pop it out. You just want to be careful not to deform your connector. The connector for the headlight is actually slid onto part of a holding harness. Up here you can slide that off real quick. Get yourself access to the release switch. Press that down. Pop that out. At this point we will need to remove the handlebar control switch. We'll remove the 2 bolts that are holding that assembly onto the handlebar. We need to cut the zip tie that is holding the handlebar control switch wiring harness to the clutch cable's master cylinder. Pop this routing clip apart. Now we can pull our wiring harness out. We can use our screwdriver trick to get this connector apart. Pull this last connector off for the wiring harness. You can rock it, get it off those tabs. And that is everything for your handlebar control switch. Let's get that turn signal indicator light out. You can just pull down on that black portion. There we go, got it. Let's remove the other end of that connector. That last connector that I removed actually wasn't properly placed from the factory. That's the first time I've had that apart. It actually belongs up in this retainer up here So what you can do is you can route it with the little locking tab on the bottom there. Put it through the back of that, slide it in, and snap it into place. Next, we need to get our new handlebar control switch mounted up. So this will actually go easier if you just, when you start, orient it up this way a little bit so you can see your fasteners instead of trying to hunch over. And you can get those just lined up a little bit quicker and easier, and then you can reorient it once your screws are started. Even before this is complete, I can already tell you guys that I'm pretty excited about this new slim fit lighting controls, because the factory unit would actually, the way that I had my levers oriented, it would actually interfere and could rub, and was causing me to essentially put them in a position that wasn't ideal, because I had to just work with the way everything fit together. And as you can see, there's plenty of room between that lever adjustment and where the new control switch is, which allowed me to bring everything closer, including my map switch for my ECU. So this is great. I'm already excited about this because now I can think about repositioning my levers again. Okay, so I got the wiring harness, and I was able to get my map switch cable routed in that raceway there, and they're over in this snap assembly. We'll get all that tucked in there nicely so nothing's pinched up. Get that clasped, and we also need to go back and put a zip tie right here. Alright, now it's time to start connecting things up. So we can bring this harness around for the control switch, and we can get this first connector set up. Now you've got some indicator grooves for the connector itself, so just make sure you get that oriented correctly. It'll only go one way, so if it's giving you a hard time, you've probably got it backwards. We can get that snapped on, and then I'm just going to leave this as is for now until I get the indicator harness assembly for the headlight and the turn signals and all that. Everything routed in here, and then we'll kind of zip tie it all up. So now we can bring this harness assembly over here. You'll remember that connector I mentioned from the factory that wasn't properly connected up here on that little holder. Let's get that snapped in. Okay, that's in there. We can do this connector together, that one. Boom. We can pop our indicator, little dash indicator for our turn signals in there, little LED. This light coming off, or this wire, excuse me, coming off of the handlebar controls. This goes over to this relay, that exposed pin on the relay. We can pop that on there. Before we can put that headlight mask on, we need to go ahead and remove the factory turn signals so that we can install our new LEDs. We're going to need a 13mm box end wrench. That's what I like to use anyway. I like using the closed end. It's just easy to get in there without fighting. Pop those loose so you can get them by hand, and then just run those nuts off and pull that stuff out of there. Repeat on the other side. Alright, so now we're going to get the new LED turn signals installed. Sometimes you can fight these connectors trying to get them through. Sorry, let me get that back in frame. Get the small one through first, then the larger one. Okay, so this is what I was saying about those connectors. Do the big one first, get it past the connector, then do the smaller one. Run that in. So I'll put the other one on. Let's move on to the mask. Right before we do that, we need to actually go through and clean up our wires, and I'm glad I thought of that because I actually found another wire that from the factory wasn't routed the way it should have been. So this wire here, which looks like it's going over to my brakes, that is probably for your brake light, I imagine, without checking for sure, just by tracing it back. But anyways, I'm going to disconnect it because what I need to do, there's another one of those holders, which is great that KTM made these, but for some reason the tech was having a bad day or whatever. I'm going to get that routed up in there. Boom, that pops right in there. Then I can take that other connector, put it back. This stuff has nothing to do with the tidy tail. I'm just pointing this out to you guys that I found this stuff on my bike and it was this way from the factory. So, and that's why it's important to go back and clean all this up, because I'm finding pre-existing quality control issues. I'm going to reuse this one, this little routing snap clip. That was a wire that we did. This is a wire that we did. Get that stuff kind of routed and doubled over there so it's not going every direction. Okay, I think that's everything we need up top. Snap that back together. I'm gonna go ahead and put a zip tie on that. Let's do that real quick. I'm not gonna cable it to anything. I'm just gonna double it back on itself, just so that it's a little bit more low profile. All right, we are ready to start popping the mask back in. So this first part, you're gonna see you've got these two holes down here in your front fender. That corresponds with these two little prongs or posts that you've got on your mask. So you've got to tip those in there when you're going to line all that up. Okay, now that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is we've got this square area right here. This is where we pulled our brake cable out of earlier. So we need to route that through there. It's going to go in between, in front of here and behind there. As we make our final connections to the headlight mask, there's several things I want to point out. When we're talking about the orientation of the turn signals, or at least the connections, Taco Moto is sending these to you guys with a R and L, right and left. So think of that as which way you're selecting to turn. When you're selecting the right turn, selecting the left turn, that's the side signal you want. Don't try to think of it as I'm sitting on the bike or as I'm standing in front of the bike, because I know sometimes people will do it either way. Think of it as which way you're trying to turn, right? So in this case, when we want to turn right, it's that signal on that side of the bike. At least that's easy for me. That might seem obvious for some people, but you know, I was thinking about that and I was like, which is going to be which? And then I verified it, and that is the way it goes. So the way that you are turning. Now, another thing to point out on those headlights, or those turn signals, excuse me, is this connector for this white cable coming off of the relay. You can see how it's got those two sides for those little bullet or barrel type plugins. Sometimes these can be a little bit loose when they come out of the factory, so what you may have to do is kind of just pinch those down and close those gaps, because you don't want a loose connection when you go to plug the LED side into those. All right, so then let's get this mask back up here. I'm going to go ahead and connect some of these other connectors so it quits moving on me. This is for the ignition key. Get that popped in. Go back to our left side. Turn signal. Over to that white connector. Pull that little clear insulation back. Get that snapped in there. Then you can push your insulation back in. Come to the right. You're going to do the same thing. All right, another thing that might confuse you guys. So pay close attention to this. You've got your male connector coming off of your headlight directly. And then you have the female connector, which the headlight was plugged into originally. This is the one on the factory harness for the bike. Then you have two connectors coming off of the Taco Moto kit, all right? One's female, one's male. You need to take that male from the Taco Moto kit off of the relay, plug that into the female for the bike's side harness, and now you're going to take the female side from the Taco Moto kit and you're going to plug it into the bike's headlight. Okay, now that is all of our connections. So I'm just going to tuck this stuff back all neat and start popping this mask back on. So when you go to kind of compress all these wires behind the mask, what you want to do is just make sure you've got things oriented so you create space for yourself. Now you've got all your headlight connections. You're going to want to get those up high, and those are going to end up going in this void above the actual headlight in the mask. So you've got your ignition wire, that's going to be up top. Take your turn signal, put that down the bottom on both sides, right? So then you got all that turn signal stuff's going down underneath the light off either side. Headlight connections are going to go up with the ignition connection, and you can get all that stuff into that void so you've got plenty of room. Make sure you're not getting any of this stuff pinched under anything. And then get your two prongs for the headlight mask in there. Alright, get everything up top. Then you can bring the mask up, snap it onto those two nutserts, and all you got to do now is put your fasteners in there. That is those two nutserts that we need to refasten on the top of the mask. And what I'm talking about when I'm saying snapping it on there, you see how they kind of compress onto those for a certain amount of retention. Alright, we're moving on to the back. Let's get the seat removed. These 24 models, the seat actually goes forward to come off. Alright, so as we move on to the back, we need to go ahead and get our electrical connections loose. So it's easier if you just go ahead and take your ECU and its boot and just get that popped up loose there so you can get under it. And you'll see that you've got all these wires that are going back. Okay, so we need to get all that stuff disconnected. So we got these wires here. Let's go ahead and start with this little guy. Again, he's another one of those ones where sometimes it's just a little easier to get the screwdriver in there. Got him. Got him. Got him. Real quick before we go back, we are going to need to pull these two bolts as well. Alright, so to get this rear fender assembly disconnected from the bike, we're going to need to get these 4 bolts here on the underside of the rear fender. And then there's 1, 2, 3 that we also need to pull so that we can separate these 2 pieces of the fender, the black part from the orange part. Alright, let's get these 2 portions out of here. Got some cables that want to feed down. Alright, so the way these cables are routed, they go through that orange fender and then they're kind of cradled into the lower black piece. So I'm going to get all that stuff separated, and I'm actually going to go ahead and clean some of this stuff up. So now it's time to get the rear light indicator installed into that lower portion of the fender. So a couple things to point out on that. When you look at this light, you've kind of got like this, what I'll call the shorter side and the taller side. And you got that little sticker with the arrow. That's up. So up, actual up orientation of the bike. So that taller, longer flat side, that's going to be the side that goes up. This is also a little bit easy to remember because if you look at the way that the cable routes through that portion of the fender, it's on that side. So if you got it upside down, it would just be a little bit goofy. So just keep that in mind. Then they've also got these parts that looks like they 3D printed at Taco Moto. They've got that little stepped edge. That stepped edge is going to go into that race on the lower portion of the fender. So let's go ahead and get our bolts started. We've got 2 washers and 2 nylock nuts that will correspond with the other side of this. When you have a washer, you have what's called the cut side. And if you look at them closely, it's going to be hard to see on these little ones, but there's a side that is more rounded, and there's a side that's more flat, has like a sharper edge to it. That's what we call a cut side. Normally, in most installations, you put your cut side to your equipment or your part, right? And then your rounded, more finished side is the side that you correspond with the nut. So I go ahead and put that cut side of the washer toward the fender. Get that nylock nut with the nylock portion on the away from the bolt. Cut side in, nylock out, and I'm going to use an adjustable wrench to grab onto those nuts. Before you mount the rear fender back to the bike, it's best to kind of route these wires from the lower black portion up through that orange portion of the rear fender. Just get the cable started and kind of mock this up where it would mount like that. And you can then leave it loose. Don't try to bolt it up, and then that way you can kind of start to piece everything together and line all those bolts up at the same time. Now that you got those started, you can kind of piece them together at the same time. You could probably do them independently, but I think this is going to work okay. But there is an order. You do got to have that orange one slid in there, and then this black one butts up to it. And you'll also notice, just make sure you get that wire before you snap this fender into place. That fender does pop into place. You just want to make sure that wire is nice and not pinched up, routed clean. And then boom, the black one will kind of hold there and allow you to go hands-free and get your bolts. So let me get all my bolts in. All right, so cable management here at the rear end. So this little one, the smallest connector of the bunch, that one does not get used, so I'm just going to cover it up with a little bit of tape just to keep the inside of it clean, and then I'll just tuck it away. Get these with their corresponding connector. They're all kind of one way, so you can't screw them up too bad. All right, got that one. Snap these connectors in to their holders. Just make sure you got that excess cable pulled down here out of the way, and keep those wires nice and tight up here so that they don't interfere with that seat hook that goes back here. That way everything's just as discreet as possible. Get that ECU snapped down. Let's get our seat back on. Quick check on the turn signals and functions. You do need to have the bike running to check this stuff. Low beam. High beam. Low beam. Off. Left. Right. All works. Let's go around back. So back to the Enduro plate. So I've already got the holes drilled now, but here's what I did, guys. I took the Enduro plate and I mocked it up where I wanted it. Now you can see there's really not a lot of fender to work with, and you've got to get these are your positions that you can mount to. So what I did is I kind of mocked it up. I decided how little lift I was going to accept, because I could have went a little bit deeper than what I had. Fraction of an inch. I could have went a little bit deeper, but I decided that was enough. You know, if that's not doing it for me in a crash, I probably got bigger problems anyway, so I think I'm getting the functionality. So anyways, I mocked it up there, and then what I did is I took my cordless drill and I marked it. So I went through those holes, got a mark at each spot that I wanted, then I removed it, Then I drilled these holes out complete. You don't have to get all crazy with the drill and try to drill through the Enduro plate, because that way you run the risk of pushing things around and getting misalignment. So I just put it in there, get a little mark each spot, then remove it, drill them out. Now we mount it up. And now we have Enduro plate. I think that's plenty of functionality. I'm pretty happy with that actually. So that way if you take a little dump, you're good. There you go, guys. Let's do a walk around of this thing and see how it looks.